The first thing you should know is that I trusted Caleb with parts of my life I didn't even fully understand myself. Years of them. Quiet, unspoken trust, the kind you don't announce because it just exists like gravity. So when it broke, it didn't shatter loudly. It collapsed inward. It happened on a Tuesday. Of course it did. Nothing dramatic, no storm outside, no raised voices. Just a normal evening that should have ended with us brushing our teeth side by side and arguing about what to watch before bed. Caleb and I had been together for 6 years. We met through mutual friends, did the slow burn thing, moved in after a year, and built a life that felt solid in that boring, grown-up way people secretly crave. Shared rent, shared routines, shared future plans we half joked about but both believed in. I was folding laundry in the bedroom when his phone buzzed on the dresser. I wasn't snooping. I want that clear. I didn't even pick it up at first. But then it buzzed again. And again. Same notification sound, back to back. That instinctive flicker of curiosity lit up before I could stop it. The screen lit up with a name I didn't recognize. Can't stop thinking about last night. My stomach tightened, not dramatically, not yet. Just enough to make me pause. I stared at the phone like it might explain itself. Caleb was in the shower. I could hear the water running, steady and unbothered. I told myself it was probably harmless. A coworker, a misunderstanding, some context I didn't have. I picked up the phone. That was the mistake. Or maybe the mistake had already happened, and this was just the moment it finally reached me. The message thread was short, painfully short. No long history to soften the blow. Just enough. Enough to see photos I wasn't meant to see. Enough to read words that didn't belong to me. Enough to understand that last night wasn't hypothetical and it wasn't innocent. I sat down on the edge of the bed because my legs stopped cooperating. It wasn't even the experience itself that hurt the most. It was the familiarity in the messages. The ease. The tone that said this wasn't a drunken accident. It was a choice made calmly, deliberately, with time to stop. When Caleb walked into the room, towel slung low on his hips, I don't think he noticed right away that something had shifted. He smiled at me automatically. The same smile I'd trusted for years. "Hey," he said. "You okay?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt something detach inside my chest. "Who's Ryan?" I asked. The smile didn't disappear immediately. It faltered, just a fraction. But that fraction told me everything. He opened his mouth, closed it, ran a hand through his damp hair. "It's not Dash," he started, then stopped himself. "It's not what you think." That sentence landed like an insult. Like he thought after 6 years, I wouldn't recognize betrayal when it stood right in front of me, dripping water onto our bedroom floor. I held up the phone. My hand was steady. I was proud of that, in a hollow sort of way. "Then explain it," I said. He sat down across from me, elbows on his knees, suddenly smaller somehow. And for a moment, just a moment, I saw the man I loved scrambling for words, terrified of losing me. But fear didn't undo what he'd done. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he said quietly. "It was a mistake." I nodded slowly. One mistake. That's what people call it when they don't want to say the real thing out loud. Because what he didn't understand yet, what I was only beginning to realize, was that the mistake wasn't the night before. The mistake was believing years of trust could survive a single choice that proved it was never fully respected in the first place. I sat there, phone resting between us like evidence, and felt the version of my life I thought I was living slip quietly out of reach. We didn't yell. That's the part people always expect when I tell them later. They imagine slammed doors, raised voices, something cinematic. But that night was quiet, almost reverent, like we were standing in a room where something had died, and neither of us knew how to speak over it. Caleb kept talking, explaining, apologizing in that careful, measured way that made it clear he'd rehearsed these words. Even if he swore he hadn't. "It didn't mean anything," he said. "It was just attention. I don't know. I never wanted to hurt you." I watched his mouth move and realized something unsettling. I believed he was sorry. I just didn't believe it mattered. "You didn't want to hurt me," I repeated slowly. "But you knew it would." He flinched at that. A real one this time. He tried again. "We've been in a routine for a while." I felt invisible. That one landed harder than I expected. Not because it was unfair, but because it was familiar. I felt invisible too, sometimes. That quiet distance that creeps into long relationships when you stop checking in because you assume you already know each other. The difference was what we did with it. I stood up and walked to the window, staring out the parking lot below. Same cars, same dim lights. The world hadn't shifted at all, which felt wrong considering how much mine had. You could have told me, I said. My voice surprised me. Calm, steady. You could have said you were struggling. We could have done something about it. I know, he said behind me. I was scared. I turned back to him. So was I. Every time I thought something felt off. But I trusted you enough to believe we'd talk when it mattered. That's when his eyes filled. Not theatrically, just quietly. Years of shared history pressing down all at once. I don't want to lose you, he said. I wanted to say that he already had. Instead, I said nothing. Silence felt more honest. We sat there for a long time after that. No phones, no distractions. Just the weight of 6 years sitting between us, reshaping itself into something unrecognizable. Eventually, he asked the question neither of us wanted to ask. What happens now? I thought about the version of myself from a week earlier. The one who assumed this relationship was a given. Who planned weekends around him without thinking. Who trusted without bracing for impact. I don't know, I said truthfully, but I can't pretend this didn't change everything. That night, we slept in the same bed out of habit more than choice. We lay on opposite sides, backs turned, not touching. The space between us felt wider than any room I'd ever been in. I didn't cry. Not then. My body was still in shock, conserving something for later. At some point, his breathing evened out. Mine didn't. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment I'd brushed off, every time I'd chosen trust over doubt. Not with regret exactly, but with a new, uncomfortable clarity. Trust, I realized, isn't just about believing someone won't hurt you. It's about believing they'll choose you even when it's hard. And somewhere along the way, Caleb had stopped making that choice. The realization settled slowly, heavily. Not as anger, not even as heartbreak yet, just as truth. Mourning didn't bring clarity. It never does. It just brings light, and with it, no place to hide. I woke before my alarm, the room washed in that dull gray that makes everything feel unfinished. Caleb was still asleep, turned toward the window now, one arm flung across the empty space where I used to be. I watched his chest rise and fall and felt nothing sharp. No spike of anger. No sudden grief. Just distance. Like I was already halfway gone. I got up quietly and went to the kitchen. Made coffee out of muscle memory. 2 mugs at first, then I stopped myself and put one back in the cabinet. That small decision hit harder than the messages had. When he finally came out, hair rumpled, eyes tired, he paused like he didn't know where to stand. Our apartment suddenly had invisible lines drawn through it. New rules neither of us had agreed on, but both instinctively followed. Morning, he said. Morning. We drank our coffee leaning against opposite counters. The silence wasn't hostile. It was careful, like we were both afraid that one wrong sentence would finish something neither of us was ready to bury yet. I took the day off, he said finally. Thought maybe we could talk more. I nodded, though I wasn't sure what was left to say. Talking hadn't stopped him. Talking hadn't protected us. Still, I appreciated the effort. Or maybe I just appreciated that he noticed how fragile everything was now. Around noon, I went for a walk by myself. No destination, just movement. The city felt unchanged, people laughing, dogs pulling at leashes, couples arguing softly over nothing important. I felt like a ghost drifting through a version of life I no longer fully belonged to. That's when the question I'd been avoiding finally caught up to me. Could I forgive him? Not hypothetically, not someday, but in a way that didn't cost me pieces of myself every time I looked at him. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't just about letting go of anger. It's about deciding what you're willing to live with afterward. The suspicion, the recalibration, the part of your brain that never quite goes quiet again. By the time I got back, my chest felt heavy but settled, like a decision was forming even if I wasn't ready to name it yet. Caleb looked up from the couch when I came in. Hope flashed across his face before he could stop it. We don't have to decide anything today, he said quickly. I just want a chance to fix this. I sat down across from him, close enough to see the fear in his eyes, far enough not to touch. I know you do, I said, and I meant it. But wanting to fix it doesn't mean it goes back to what it was. He nodded slowly. I know. That was new. Or maybe it was just honest. That evening, we agreed on something temporary. Space. Not a breakup. Not a promise. Just room to breathe without pretending we were okay. He packed a bag. Not dramatically. Just enough for a few nights. When he stood by the door, keys in hand, he hesitated. I love you, he said. His voice cracked on the word. And for the first time since the night before, I felt the ache bloom properly in my chest. I know, I said, and after a beat, added, I loved you too. The door closed softly behind him. I stood there longer than I needed to, listening to the quiet settle into the apartment. It didn't feel empty exactly. It felt paused, like my life was holding its breath, waiting to see who I'd choose to be next. I sat on the couch and let that truth sink in, not with panic, not with resolve, just with a tired kind of honesty. One mistake hadn't erased 6 years, but it had changed what those years meant. And I wasn't sure yet what I was going to do with that. The first night alone felt wrong in a way I hadn't expected. Not dramatic, not crushing, just off. Like walking into a room where the furniture's been rearranged in the dark and your body keeps bracing for corners that aren't there anymore. I didn't sleep much. I wasn't replaying the messages or imagining him with someone else. That phase had passed. Instead, my brain fixated on smaller things. The way he always forgot to replace the Brita filter. How he hummed under his breath when he cooked. The fact that I could tell what mood he was in just by how hard he closed a fridge. 6 years trains you like that. Quietly. Permanently. The next few days slipped by in a strange limbo. We texted, but only logistics. Who was picking up the mail? Which bills were on autopay? Neutral ground. Safe ground. Anything emotional felt too exposed to touch. I went to work, smiled at coworkers, answered emails like my life hadn't tilted on its axis. At night, I came home to the apartment and felt the echo of him in every room. Not haunting, just present. Like trust itself had left fingerprints behind. By the fourth day, something unexpected happened. I felt lighter. That scared me more than the sadness had. It wasn't relief. Not exactly. It was the absence of tension I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. The constant low-level effort of maintaining certainty, of assuming safety without checking in, of trusting on autopilot. Trust, I learned, is heavier than we admit. Caleb called that evening. I stared at the phone for a long moment before answering. Hey, he said. His voice sounded careful, like he was stepping onto ice. Hey, a pause. Then, I miss you. I closed my eyes. I know. I've been thinking a lot, he continued. Not about fixing things. About why I didn't talk to you. Why I chose something easy instead of something honest. That word honest used to belong to us. I don't want to be the person who broke your faith in people, he said quietly. I leaned back against the couch. You didn't break my faith in people. He waited. You broke my faith in us. I finished. Silence stretched between us, thick but not hostile. I don't know if I'm asking for another chance, he said eventually. I think I just needed you to know I finally understand what I risk. I believed him. That was the cruelest part. Growth didn't erase consequences. Awareness didn't rebuild what had collapsed. I'm glad you're figuring that out, I said, and meant it. We didn't say goodbye. The call just ended, like neither of us wanted to define it. Later that night, I sat on the floor of the living room, back against the couch, lights off. I thought about the version of love I used to believe in, the one where trust was a finish line you crossed and then stopped worrying about. I don't believe that anymore. Trust isn't a trophy. It's a practice. A choice made over and over again, especially when it's inconvenient. Especially when no one's watching. Caleb made one choice that undid years of quieter ones. Not because those years were fake, but because trust doesn't work on averages. It works on moments. I didn't know yet whether our story was over. I only knew that whatever came next couldn't be built on the same foundation. And I wasn't willing to carry the weight of blind faith just to avoid starting over. As I sat there, breathing into the quiet, a new realization settled, not sharp, not dramatic. Just steady. I hadn't lost everything. I'd lost certainty. And maybe, in time, that would make room for something truer. 2 weeks passed. Not quickly. Not slowly. Just deliberately. Like time itself was giving me space without asking what I planned to do with it. Caleb didn't come back to the apartment. We didn't talk every day. And somewhere in that quiet, I started to hear myself again. Not the version of me shaped around us, but the one that existed before everything became shared and assumed. I went out with friends one Friday night, nothing wild. Drinks, loud music, bad bar lighting. I laughed more than I expected to. Not performative laughter. Real, chest-loosening laughter that surprised me mid-breath. At one point, a guy leaned in to hear me better over the noise. Tall, kind eyes. No history. No weight. I felt the faintest flicker of interest and then something else underneath it. Not guilt. Permission. I didn't give him my number. I wasn't ready for that. But I walked home feeling something unfamiliar and steady in my chest. Possibility, maybe, or just a reminder that my life wasn't on hold, even if my heart still was. The apartment felt different when I got back. Less like a shrine, more like a place I lived again. Caleb reached out the next morning. Not with apologies. Not with promises. Just a question. Can we talk? In person. I stared at the message longer than I needed to. My body checked in with itself before my brain could interfere. There was no spike of panic. No rush of longing. Just readiness. We met at a small Sifaka halfway between his place and mine. Neutral territory. A place without memories. He looked tired. Not wrecked, just worn in the way people look when they've been thinking too honestly for too long. Hey, he said. Hey. We sat. Ordered coffee. Let the moment breathe. I'm not here to convince you of anything, he said finally. I just needed to see you. To say something out loud instead of carrying it around. I nodded. Okay. I broke something, he said. No qualifiers. No excuses. And I know I don't get to decide if it's reparable. The humility in that sentence landed deeper than any apology had before. I've been asking myself who I am without you, he continued. And I don't like the answer yet. But I'm working on it. For me. Not to win you back. I believed him. Again. And again, belief didn't mean reunion. I don't regret loving you, I said quietly. But I can't unlearn what this taught me. He swallowed. I wouldn't ask you to. We finished our coffee. No tears. No dramatics. Just two people acknowledging the shape of what had been lost and what couldn't be rebuilt the same way. When we stood to leave, there was a moment familiar, instinctive where we both hesitated. 6 years reaching for habit. He didn't hug me. Neither did I. Outside, the air was crisp. Clean. I watched him walk away and felt something close not to peace, but to alignment. Like my heart and my spine had finally agreed on something. That night, back in my apartment, I opened the windows and let the city noise in. I made dinner just for myself. Ate slowly. Thought about trust not as something I'd lost, but as something I'd redefined. One mistake had ended a version of my life, but had also clarified something essential. I didn't want perfect loyalty born from fear. I wanted chosen honesty, even when it risked everything. And this time, I was choosing myself first. The realization didn't feel triumphant. It felt solid, like ground. The strange thing about choosing yourself is that it doesn't arrive with fireworks. No swelling music, no sudden confidence boost that fixes everything at once. It shows up quietly, disguised as small decisions you don't second-guess anymore. I stopped checking my phone first thing in the morning, half expecting his name. I stopped framing my thoughts like updates I'd eventually share. When something good happened at work, my instinct was still to tell Caleb, and then it wasn't. The urge faded before it could hurt. One evening, I realized I'd gone an entire day without thinking about him at all. That scared me. Then it relieved me. Then it felt earned. I started reclaiming parts of myself I'd let blur at the edges. I signed up for an early morning gym class I'd always skipped because it didn't match his schedule. I cooked food he never liked, too spicy, too experimental, and ate it straight out of the pan, standing by the counter. I rearranged the living room, not dramatically, just enough that the space no longer expected him to walk back into it. Change doesn't need permission once trust is gone. It just needs honesty. A month later, I ran into Ryan by accident. Not that Ryan, the name from the messages, but another one. Different face, different energy. No history tangled up in my chest. We met through mutual friends years ago and barely spoken since. He smiled when he saw me, surprised but easy. We talked. Nothing heavy, nothing loaded. Just two people catching up without landmines under every sentence. At one point, he asked if I wanted to grab coffee sometime. There it was, the moment I'd been subconsciously preparing for. I didn't rush to answer. I checked in with myself, the way I hadn't before with Caleb, with anyone. No fear. No need to prove I was okay. Just curiosity. Yeah, I said. I'd like that. Walking home afterward, I noticed how different this felt from the beginning of my last relationship. There was no urgency. No need to merge lives or declare meaning. Just the simple acknowledgement that something new could exist without erasing what came before. Trust, I realized, doesn't come back all at once. It returns in pieces. Tested, observed, earned again by yourself first. That night, I sat on the balcony with a beer, the city stretched out below me in flickers of light and sound. I thought about Caleb not with longing, not with resentment, but with a strange kind of gratitude that surprised me. He'd been a huge part of my life, a real one, and he'd also been the catalyst for a necessary ending. One mistake had ended our relationship, but it hadn't ended my ability to love or trust or choose better next time. It had just forced me to stop confusing familiarity with safety. As the night air cooled, I felt something settle fully into place. Not closure. Life doesn't hand that out so neatly, but acceptance. The kind that doesn't ask for apologies or explanations anymore. I hadn't lost years of my life. I'd lived them. And now, I was living what came after, eyes open, footing steady, finally willing to trust again without betraying myself in the process. That felt like enough. I didn't wake up one day magically healed. That's not how it works, no matter how many tidy stories pretend otherwise. What happened instead was quieter, slower. A series of mornings where my chest didn't feel tight the second I opened my eyes. The coffee tasted like coffee again, not like something to drink while bracing yourself. I went on that coffee date with Ryan, then another. Nothing rushed. No big declarations. We talked about stupid things, bad movies we secretly loved, jobs we tolerated, cities we weren't sure we wanted to stay in forever. He listened in a way that didn't feel like performance, and when I spoke, I didn't filter myself for approval. That was new. At one point, he asked, "What ended your last relationship?" I didn't flinch, didn't sugarcoat it either. He made one choice that showed me I'd been trusting the idea of us more than the reality. I said. Ryan nodded. No praying. No trying to fix it for me. Just acceptance. That felt better than reassurance ever had. Weeks later, I ran into Caleb one last time. Pure coincidenze. Same grocery store. Same aisle. He looked healthier, more grounded, less like someone chasing absolution. We exchanged a few words. Polite. Human. Real. I hope you're doing well, he said. I am. I replied, and this time, it wasn't something I said to be strong. It was just true. When we parted, I didn't replay the interaction afterward. Didn't dissect it for hidden meaning. It stayed exactly what it was. A chapter acknowledging its ending without trying to reopen itself. Walking home, I realized something important. Trust hadn't been destroyed. It had been clarified. I understood now that trust isn't about assuming someone will never hurt you. It's about knowing you'll recognize the moment they stop choosing you and that you'll choose yourself when that happens. That knowledge didn't make me colder. It made me steadier. Some nights I still thought about the life I almost kept. The one where I stayed because history felt heavier than possibility. But those thoughts no longer came with regret. Just perspective. Years of trust hadn't been wasted. They taught me how deeply I could love and how clearly I deserved to be loved back. One mistake had ended a relationship, but it hadn't ended my capacity for connection or my belief in honesty or my willingness to build something real again this time without surrendering parts of myself to keep the peace. As I lay in bed one night, city sounds drifting in through the open window, I felt a quiet certainty settle over me. Not that everything would work out perfectly, but that I would be okay even when it didn't. And that was the kind of trust worth carrying forward.